This episode is all about aperture, what it is, how you can control it, and how you can get the best from it. So for first time beginners into photography, I think aperture is one of the hardest things to get your head around. We're going to try and go through some simple steps, try and break it down for you to understand how it works and how you can control it with your camera. So aperture is all about what's going on inside your lens. Each lens will have its own f range, or this aperture range that it's capable of shooting at. Usually speaking, the lower the f number that you see on your lens, the better aperture that you're going to get on your camera. So what does this mean? What does this aperture mean exactly? So the aperture is basically the size of the diaphragm inside your lens. So think of the human eye. The more you open the human eye, the more light you're going to see, or more of an image you're going to see. If you close the human eye, you're not going to see any light at all. So this diaphragm, the more it's closed, the less amount of light is going to come in. That's something we're going to come back to later on in this video, but just remember that point just now. So for aperture, the smaller the number, the larger the diaphragm is, or the aperture is, in your lens. The larger the number, the smaller the aperture is. This is where it gets a bit confusing because it's kind of backwards, it's counterintuitive. So I'm just going to give you some diagrams just to show you what I mean here. The smaller the aperture, which is the diaphragm inside your lens, the larger the f-stop number is going to be on your display in your camera. The larger the aperture, so the wider the diaphragm on your lens, the smaller the number is going to be on that display on your camera. So wide apertures are really good to get that kind of blurry background that you might see in nice portrait photography. So if you're taking a picture of someone outside or even inside and you just want to get that kind of blurry background without any distractions, you just want to concentrate on the face and get the eyes in focus, then a wide aperture is what you're going to want to get this done. A wide aperture means that f number has got to be its lowest point on the camera to try and get the shallowest depth of field. So the lower the f number, the shallower the depth of field is, which means when you focus on something, there's going to be a very shallow depth of field. Okay, it could range from anything from a few millimeters, and this is when you're getting down to macro photography, right through to hundreds of meters, and this is where the f number gets higher and higher. So whenever we talk about high f numbers, it means that the range of focus in this depth of field is a lot greater. This is really good for taking pictures of cityscapes or landscapes, and you want to try and get everything from the foreground right through to the distance all in sharp focus. You generally use a high f number, somewhere in the range of f12, f16, 18. It really depends on how much of a scene you're taking a picture of. So just go out and experiment with this f number, and I'm just going to give you a couple of clips here just to explain and show you the differences between taking a picture at say 1.8 to a picture saying at f18 or f20. So I've gone outside, I've taken a picture of this very uninteresting plant right here. I want to make sure that I isolate the subject and blur out any kind of distractions such as other leaves or other backgrounds. So one way I can do this is by widening the aperture. So to widen the aperture, I would lower the f number down like this, and as you can see, as I lower the f number down, it's decreasing the depth of field to the background. So when you lower that f-stop down, the background becomes more blurry or out of focus because the depth of field is a lot shallower. So in these examples you can physically see the size of the aperture increasing as you lower the f-stop on your camera. Aperture is one of the three fundamental things that you're going to need to know about photography when you're getting into using your camera, your DSLR or something. You want to really get to know what it can do. When I say it's one of the three fundamental key points, aperture is one, shutter speed is another, and ISO is the third. I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios that you may find when you're outside in the field and you're taking a photo and you're playing around with the aperture. So first, example I want to give you is a portrait. So you're taking a picture of a portrait, you're taking a picture of a person outside. You want to blur the background, so you would drop your f number down as low as possible. So you're just focusing on the subject itself and isolating everything else, any other distractions. So the f number or f-stop is its lowest point, which means it's at this widest aperture. The wide aperture is allowing lots more light coming in. It's actually letting too much light in now, and everything is overexposed in your camera. So how do you compensate that? Well, you can change the shutter speed to compensate the amount of light that's taken in when you press that shutter button. Alright, so another scenario is if you're taking a picture of a landscape or a cityscape, you want to get everything from the foreground, say some trees or a road or something in the foreground, right through to the distance in the background in sharp focus. So to get everything in a sharp focus, we would generally use a small aperture, which means this f number or the f-stop has to be a lot higher than it was previously. So the f number would maybe you'd start putting it up to 10, 12, 14, 16. You'd have to really play around, and it really depends on where the sweet spot is of each lens that you're using on your camera. Now, as I mentioned, the higher the f number, the smaller the amount of light is going to go through your aperture, which means again you're going to have to compensate somewhere else on your camera to allow more light to draw in through the lens when you press that button. Again, this could be done through shutter speed, but if you're trying to capture the motion of the sea, or if there's any kind of motion, you don't want motion in the camera and you don't want to change the shutter speed, then you can also change something called the ISO, and I'll go into that in another video. So I hope this video has helped you in a way. I'm trying to make these videos as simple as possible to understand. If you want me to go over it in detail, you can always send me a message or an email, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. I'll answer any comments that you may have. Thank you very much for watching, and as always,